All right, very good. I'm having a conversation with Hector Cardenas, who leads our operations practice. He's enthusiastically been working with a few clients on yet another way of doing landed cost planning by creating a templating system to be able to automate the landed cost charges that go on receiving. I'm going to turn this over to Hector. Thank you, Hector.
Let me just preface this by saying what the solution is trying to accomplish. Some of our customers, they want to do a landed cost estimate at the time of an item receipt. So NetSuite offers various ways to make those entries. You could make those entries directly at the item receipt level, and kind of in a header way, just to say this item receipt, I'm going to allocate some landed costs to it using cost categories. There's another way you could do that is by using the landed cost at the line level. We're going to talk about today is the line level. And NetSuite, for that, you could just type in costs that you have for a particular item, or they have this other solution called a landed cost template. So you can beforehand create templates and say, hey, for this template, I'm going to estimate some landed costs based on, say, quantities of items that you're receiving or value of the item that you're receiving. And then you take those landed cost templates and you associate it with items. If your request is pretty simple, NetSuite's offer is pretty good. It works. The problem is that our clients have multi-attribute complex requirements that aren't just related to, say, an item or a quantity. There might be other attributes about this item, which vendor it came from, what location it might be in. There's all kinds of variety of things. And so in doing that, we need something that's more conducive to support the business. The tool really is predicated on what we're calling a landed cost rate card, a card that describes a couple of things. And you see, we have a number of cards in the system, and I'll bring one of these up for you. Okay. And so this card will just, kind of highlight some of the interesting things. You give it a name. It's got a cost category that's associated with it, this native NetSuite cost category. We have this formula. It uses math. These are field values, some kind of a description. And then we have this, what we call matching criteria. So all of these criteria are matching elements that we can associate an item receipt with. If an item receipt is within the subsidiary and it has this warehouse location, then it will apply this rate card formulation, right? Now, the nice thing about this criteria is that you create the criteria. We don't tell you what you have to do. You could create any field that you would be able to find on a item receipt. As long as you could source the data onto the item receipt, it's available to you. And that's either at the line level or at the header level.
But are you saying then that the rate card here, like I see something that says chill, non-chill, in an implementation, we have a special kind of field that's part of maybe perhaps their items or their receipt attributes. We can enhance this rate card to reflect that, so we can put the data in there to represent criteria.
Yeah, we're not saying it has to be a predefined special thing that we've already created. It could be anything that you wanted.
Okay, right? Good. So we got flexible criteria, and I see you've got some things in here where you're saying values of null or value included, but you're also playing with the idea of exclude. So if we want to go negatives on this, meaning whatever criteria we need, we can get.
Exactly. Whatever criteria that you need, you can get to. All of this just states the matching preferences for this rate card. And you can imagine you could have all kinds of rate cards that have different,
this is very flexible
criteria. Very flexible, right? And we don't, you don't need to write any custom code. All you need to do is create the field. We do have an app setting that supports it, and then all of our tools just read all the data as you're creating it. So anytime you want to add something new, no development is required.
Is the rates down below basically an effective rate table for this rate card?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. But you don't need to have this, right? You could just say, for all time, I just want a formula, and it's going to apply. But sometimes you have a strategy that changes maybe monthly. Yeah, it does that kind of thing, right? Shipping rates go up in the world. You got to change the rate, right?
But you've got effective dating on there, which is usually a more demanding sort of things. But you could prepare when this is going to come into play, and you could kind of not have to worry that we're going to transition in time. So you did that.
Right, exactly. Total planning ability, right? So you could plan out what your rates are going to be and before they actually start happening. We also deal with a little bit of unit of measure here, because there is some variability on the line could meet all of these criteria, have various units of measures, kind of another matching element here. And then you have this factor amount. This factor amount is really just the variable that's inserted into the formula. So that's kind of the basics of the rate card. So it looks at item receipts that are being created as they're being created or edited. What we do is we basically read the item receipt and look at all of the attributes of an item receipt. And where we find matches to rate cards, then we produce, a match and then make that calculation. So in this situation, right, you have a couple of lines and they met some of the criteria. And what happens here is we find the match and then we do a little bit of work here just to talk about what we found, right? Because you could imagine if you have a lot of rate cards, you're not even sure which ones are getting hit. Well, we tell you which ones are getting hit, right? We say, okay, you got to hit here, you got to hit on this one. So we create a list of all the rate cards that are hit. And then we also say what we calculate here, right? Which we're calculating based on the rate card, this customs duty and clearing this cost category and a warehouse inbound. That's kind of like a valid check to make sure, yeah, do I really match, right? Does that amount match, right? With the landed costs that we're writing into this record, right? We're in total control of here.
So if I follow you though, just let me ask you a question then. The criteria can be at the header or at the line.
Yes.
Ultimately, when the item receipt is saved, the rate cards are looked up, the applicable rate cards by line are pulled in, and that's why that can be a list over there on the far right.
Correct, right. We supply the list, right? We supply this list of rate cards.
You would actually push the values into the landed cost pop-up, and you produce a nice summary on the line so you could see what the English would have been so that you could have an interpretation. This is also helping us confirm the logic is correct, but then anybody doesn't have to pop open this if it's trustworthy. They don't have to pop open the value.
Exactly. You could see it right there, right? You could see what we're doing. We're just recording that. We're helping us just to understand what's happening in the background. Because it's hard to
help in some reporting.
It could help in reporting. It could help in troubleshooting because sometimes you think you're going to hit this, and then oh no, there's something wrong with the matching criteria. You might have gotten it wrong. So it's helpful to see that, and then you can assess, how you can rewrite your rate card, right, to make it work, make the match that you're looking for.
Okay. Conceptually, this is quite easy to understand. When you contrasted this to NetSuite's landed cost templates, the main thing you saw over there is that their landed cost template was going against an item only. Is our primary innovation on it the one that criteria mechanism of the rate card, or was there other things that you saw was a breakthrough?
Yeah, I mean, I think the criteria by far is the biggest solve in this solution, right? That's the biggest challenge we had to overcome. Because the reality is that many of these, if you think about freight. Well, freight is a function of distance, location, those kinds of elements. Those aren't really the function of the item that you're bringing in, right? Well, it really depends on where you're bringing it from. Well, for freight, it's an important piece. You know where things are being shipped from and to during the item receipt process. And so then you can make some good estimates based on that kind of information. So that's the primary thing. The other piece that I think is important is that these calculations, Marty, are completely flexible. You are creating the formula. So you could imagine getting any kind of data that you can present onto an item receipt and then using that data to generate in your formula.
Okay, but your technique though is get the data sourced to the item receipt. So if there's an interested variable you want, get it to the item receipt. If you can get it to the item receipt, the rate card technology and your criteria can read it and use it in formulas. Of course, a different technique could have been also a way to traverse the database through perhaps a plugin to go find and look up things. We didn't do that.
We didn't do that.
But that's understandable. This is easy to understand.
Totally. You could have gone more. What it forces you, or you think about it in this way, is that how far can I extend this to get the data close by, right? Now, you could go the other way. I got to go out and get the data. But being resourceful, you could use all kinds of scripting logic to get the data where you want it, right?
Okay.
So you
But
could
I
think of it
understand the
that way.
paradigm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
could see at least this way when we teach our clients how to do it, they're pretty empowered to go get the data onto the item receipt, describe the criteria, describe the formula. It should work.
exactly. And the nice thing about this, Marty, I could tell when we started with our customer, we created the things that we knew about, right? These are the criteria that we know about in our discovery. And so we created rate cards and custom fields and, help them customize it. But I could see even now, once we release the thing, they are now creating their own new fields. They're inventing new things and then adding to the tools without
Oh,
even having to work with us, right? They're able to just use the tools to create this on their own. So
okay.
that to
And
me is really helpful.
that's powerful. Okay, so a couple other questions. Now we know we did this in the landed cost lines,
Mhm.
and this application is really line oriented, which is really where there's usually more flexibility and getting more value there. So I can understand the landed cost lines. And there's nothing that's preventing us from doing header kind of calculations on these lines because it all could be the way you do the criteria. So you can get to the same effect. The the thing that our other library of landed cost elements could provide is the accrual could be applied, but this is keeping it nice and simple. It's hitting the charges, and you have to set up the landed cost categories to effectively get the credit elements to land where you want them to land. That's part of the shaping of the model.
Yeah, totally, totally. And they made some decisions about what accounts they wanted to use as the
Yes,
accrual accounts, right? And all of
yes.
that element as well. But yeah, that's totally right. And you can shape this. We do obviously we have other solutions, our landed cost, PO or purchase order element. It's a little different way of thinking about the problem that has other advantages that this doesn't really cover. This is really about estimating and trying to accrue for those charges and then settling yourself, every periodically, right, to make sure you're in line with action.
Okay. What
All,
I love
all
about
good.
this model though is it's simple to understand. It's a direct replacement to the landed cost template system that NetSuite's trying to provide. It's more flexible because we can make it become whatever we need to become with the criteria and the things that we need to do. I know some of our landed cost library, other elements have different kinds of models,
Yeah.
but this core one is simple to understand. I mean, we can continue to augment and do more with landed cost stuff like the accruals, like generating the purchase orders for shipping and various other sorts of things for setting up the obligations, but that's all add-on stuff.
Right, right. This is very simple and powerful. You don't have to create lots of landed cost templates to try to figure this out.
Okay.
So, mhm.
In your experience now in trying to do an implementation of this, now that we've done it for a few clients, when trying to help a client do an implementation of this, is there anything that you sort of worry about that the client should a little worry about and just trying to get ready in doing this? Has
Yes.
anything come up that you said, let's just watch out for this?
Well, the things interestingly are really in the way people think about items and item setup. For example, there's not a lot of rigor in how they've set up items and item
Hmm.
attributes.
Hmm.
And so there's sloppiness. And that's part of the discovery that sometimes you see, you go, oh, you have all of these items and the coding isn't quite right. It doesn't make sense. Maybe you use like text fields to like describe things
I see.
instead of lists. And so in the doing, you go, well, how am I going to get this to work? So there might be some item like you gotta get items like in a solid state. So
Yeah,
that's
that makes
probably the
sense.
biggest thing,
And that makes sense
right?
to me that probably the item hasn't been well modeled and then well maintained according to the model.
Right.
Once you do that and you really take care of the database, then the criteria can hit and all the things can happen. But of course, we don't know that going in. So that's part of the conversations as you try to implement it. What's the quality of the items?
Yes, the quality of the data, because that's really what we're trying to target, right? Is really good standardized data because we're saying, hey, every time we hit that, then we have something valid to attach ourselves to, right? So that's been probably the biggest thing is understanding the business, making sure the data model is correct, and then just implementing is not as difficult. It's a
Okay.
pretty good model.
Okay. I think I totally get it. I'm looking
Okay.
forward to sharing this with the community. This is awesome. Thank you, Hector.